I want to make known my strong concerns and disappointments with the federal government's lack of preparedness in issuing new directives regarding airport screening. That fail is directly the cause of last night's unacceptable conditions at O'Hare International Airport and other airports across the country. I've had a series of very frank discussions with our federal liaisons, both at the White House and at Homeland Security, to express my concern and disappointment, but also to offer concrete suggestions on how to avoid or at least mitigate these problems going forward. The safety and security of our residents, including the traveling public at O'Hare, the world's busiest airfield, are our top concern. Last night, we saw their safety and security was seriously compromised, and people were forced into conditions that are against CDC guidance and are totally unacceptable. Thousands of travelers were forced to wait in exceedingly long lines, congregating in concourses and putting themselves and their loved ones at greater risk of exposure of COVID-19. I do, though, want to thank all of those personnel who really rallied in this crisis and stepped up to help their fellow members of the public, and I particularly want to recognize the Salvation Army, who stepped up to provide food and water and other resources to those that were in this unfortunate situation last night. But I want to repeat, this is utterly unacceptable. Going forward, we have to turn in a different direction. And I specifically want to address these comments to Vice President Pence and members of the Federal Coronavirus Task Force. What we need, number one, before any additional federal directives that impact states and localities are issued, you must listen to mayors and governors and other local officials first. Bring us along on the journey before you make directives that then we are forced to implement in a way that doesn't serve the interests of the public. Federal directives that are issued obviously always impact local officials and localities. And if you do not listen and you do not bring us along on the journey first, where we can give you constructive input on how those directives will actually be playing out at the local level, you're going to see more disasters like last night that are solely the responsibility of the federal government not listening.
몸이 불편하신 손님, 입장료와 유아 및 5세 이하의 소아를 원하신 승객께서는 107번 탑승구 앞으로 나오셔서 탑승을 하시기 바랍니다. 감사합니다.
And when you do, I will listen. Any passengers who need special assistance, elderly passengers, and passengers with infants or small children may need on the flight may board at this time. Thank you. When the federal government doesn't listen, and when it doesn't bring the considerations of mayors and governors and other local officials into the equation, not only are you creating a disaster, not only are you creating a hazardous circumstance that threatens the public, you risk causing serious illness and death. That's a mistake, and it's avoidable by simply listening. Not a one-way monologue, but listening and engaging with us at the local level. We can and will be your partners if you bring us into the discussion. Now, second, regarding staffing for Customs and Border Patrol, the federal government must immediately and significantly increase personnel devoted to airport screening. And rather than sending ICE into the streets, send screeners to our airports. That's what we need. That's what will be helpful to make sure that we are protecting the traveling public. Now, I fully recognize that this is a dynamic circumstance, and in many ways, we are in uncharted territory. But all the more reason why we must join together, one with another, and not be at odds with each other.
But we need the federal government to be here and to listen. We've got to step up the amount of staffing that is here at airports like Chicago O'Hare and other airports across the country that are bearing the burden and responsibility for making sure that passengers that are being diverted to our airports from across the world are going to be able to get out, be properly screened, and then go along their journey. That's critically important. Now, at this time, I'm going to ask Commissioner Rhee to talk about some specific steps that we are taking here at O'Hare to make sure that we mitigate the problems with implementing this latest directive from the federal government. Commissioner Rhee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for coming. And I am Jamie Rhee. I'm the Commissioner for Chicago Department of Aviation. O'Hare is the international gateway, and we are very proud of it, and we take our passenger experience very seriously. We take the health and safety of those passengers even more seriously. What we saw yesterday in our international arrivals in Customs Hall was simply not acceptable. And as the operator of this airport, I have to say that it is not acceptable. We have been engaging with our federal partners to ensure that this gets resolved immediately. I want to thank Governor Pritzker and Senators Durbin and Duckworth for taking this matter very seriously and for using their positions to raise appropriate concerns and get answers. But most of all, I want to thank Mayor Lightfoot for her leadership, and with whom I was on the phone probably a dozen times yesterday and this morning, and who has made it very clear that this cannot stand. Yesterday was the first day of enhanced screening of passengers arriving from Europe. The system inside of the FIS was simply overwhelmed. Whether it was bad planning, a lack of resources, or a combination, we all saw the results. And in fact, much of my staff experienced it as well as I did here last night, and did our part to distribute water and snacks when we weren't calling everyone who has a role in solving this issue to try to get answers. Unfortunately, we're anticipating even more flights today and passengers. We're looking at all options to alleviate the crowding and have been on the phone with our federal partners, include the FAA, to relax some of the restrictions on allowing passengers to stay on the plane, looking at metering the flow into the FIS system, working creatively with our CBB partners to do that, and adding additional resources to the DHS screening section for secondary. But there is only so much that we can do inside the FIS and T5. I want to end on a note that we have a tremendous working relationship with our federal partners here at O'Hare, and the same is true at Midway. We have worked closely together on matters for large and small to keep this airport running, growing, and improving. And without our federal partnerships, O'Hare would not be what it is today, which is the busiest airport in the world and an economic engine for our region. During the federal government shutdown 2 years ago, members of the larger airport community stepped up to bring food and to show their appreciation for those TSA workers who were doing their job without a paycheck. This is really a community that comes together to move tens of millions of passengers and bring the world to Chicago. We know that our local agents were put in a position not to succeed yesterday, and we will continue working and engaging with our federal partners to work together to resolve this issue as quickly as possible. Thank you. And again, Mayor, thank you for your leadership. So to clarify, the FIS, which is the secured sterile area in the back, is under federal jurisdiction. It is a port of entry. Those folks are coming for the first time to come into the United States must clear Customs and Border Patrol. That is the first line into the United States. After that, for those that have been already mandatory screening, as well as the UK and Ireland that was announced late Friday, those go to a secondary screening, which is being done by DHS, Department of Homeland Security. Those that then are identified as potential having issues are then referred to a third level of screening, which is the CDC. And so there is little that we can do in that federal sterile corridor to help maintain operations other than make sure that we're helping with queuing, offering water, and helping to alleviate the concerns that folks have.